Hello. Welcome to Season 8 of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a love for scary movies. In each episode, we both watch the same movie on our own and then record a conversation together about what we liked, what we hated, if we were scared, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. This season, our theme is Make the Wives Pick. Since our wives have to watch these movies with us every week, and often complain about it, we made them pick the movies this season. If you want to see the list of upcoming films and follow along, check out our website at thehorrific.com. Thanks for listening. So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I want to know if you ever think about this too, or if I'm just crazy, but do you ever spend like a decent amount of time thinking about like names that have gone out of fashion?
Yeah, sometimes when I see younger people call my mom's name, and it's like I'm not gonna go blast with it, but it's like, oh man, that's like, I feel like that's an old person's name.
Well, I feel like there are some that have just disappeared entirely.
Yeah.
Like, when was the last time you met somebody under, let's say, 45, named like Al or Woody or
Right.
Leon or Dean? Like, I just don't think those are out there.
Yeah.
Anyway, I saw that Craig T. Nelson was in this movie, and I was like, ooh, Craig, that's one to put on the list.
That's a good point, actually.
Yeah. But yeah, so this week we did Poltergeist, and it was on Netflix, so I didn't have to pay for it, so that was a good start. And I had not seen this movie before. I'd seen pieces of it, but I had never watched it start to finish. And even what I had seen, I think it was when I was pretty young. What about you?
Yeah, so this movie's on Netflix and it's for free, but I ended up paying for it to rent because I'm an idiot. But I actually never had seen it. I've obviously seen bits and pieces just over the years, but I have not seen it in all. Words are hard.
That is true. Yeah, I think it's kind of funny that neither of us have experience with this movie, even though it's a pretty like iconic horror thing.
Yeah.
Like, if you talk to a lot of people about what are some of the movies that like scared you the most, I think this is on a lot of people's list because they saw it when they were very young.
Yeah.
And I think that means it was kind of like, it was a hit movie. It was not a movie that only fans of horror saw at the time. It was pretty successful, and it's worked its way into popular culture.
Well, it was even like when we got the list from the wives and saw it on the list, it was like, oh yeah, why haven't we done this before? Yeah.
Well, and especially because it's directed by Tobe Hooper.
Yeah.
So I knew that it was written and produced by Steven Spielberg, but I had always just assumed that he directed it as well. But no, Mr. Texas Chainsaw Massacre himself was the director of this movie, so I should have had higher hopes for it.
Yeah.
Put some respect on that name.
That's for damn sure.
Yeah. But anyway, I'll introduce it, and then you can do your fun facts, and then we'll get into it.
Sounds good.
In 1982, MGM/UA Entertainment Company brought us Poltergeist, a supernatural / sci-fi horror movie that was written and produced by Steven Spielberg. This movie tells the story of a family that lives in a planned community in California. The dad is a real estate agent for the company that builds the planned communities, because, that seems like a real job. And one night during a storm, some strange things start happening around the old model home. As Stefan from SNL's Weekend Update would say, this movie has everything. It has kitchen chairs moving on their own, lots of Star Wars memorabilia, and it has a clairvoyant little person with a deep southern accent. Yes, 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 yes. This movie was made on a budget of $11 million and brought in over $121 million at the box office. It can currently be streamed on Netflix.
If you could do me a favor and do Stefan describing each movie that we do from here on out, then I'll be pretty happy.
Deal.
All right. That was fantastic.
It's going to be like all of our other recurring themes where we do it for like 4 weeks and then forget.
That's true. That's true. I don't know. I've been playing the Bumbling Idiot since 2017.
Well, you've been planning your new outro for how long now?
That's true. And I got a good one for this one.
Good.
So, one of my facts is Tobe Hooper directed Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But here's another fact about him. he ate jalapeno peppers to help him power through the long shooting days. He also ate Indian curries when he had the time. Now, I bring this up to take us off topic and just explain that that's a trooper, because I had a handful of Flamin' Hot Cheetos last night, or Flamin' Hot Cheats is what I like to call them, and I've been miserable ever since.
That's rough.
Thought it was a heart attack. Just heartburn.
Yeah.
So the chair stacking scene in the kitchen, that was actually done in one take.
Oh, nice.
Did you know that?
No.
It's a little surprising. So there was confusion if Spielberg actually directed the movie or not. He was not allowed to direct both Poltergeist and E.T., but he was on the Poltergeist set often, leading many to speculate that he was secretly directing the movie himself. To quote, "I've been asked that so many times that I feel the record should be straight already," is what he told the AV Club. He said the genesis of it came from an article in LA Times when we were shooting the practical location on the house. The first 2 weeks of filming were exterior, so I had a second unit shot that had to be picked up in front of the house. I was in the back of the house shooting Robbie, actor Oliver Robbins, and the tree, looking down on the burial of a little girl, Tweety Bird. So Steven was picking those shots up for me, is what Toby Hooper said.
A likely story.
Blame it on the media. It's rare. The tree scene that was shot was actually shot backwards. Robbie, played by Oliver Robbins, was actually spit out, not swallowed up, by the tree. Reversing the shot made the final results look much better. Pretty interesting. I wonder how often movies do that. Like, sometimes you can kind of tell with the facial reactions and stuff. Like, one of the big famous ones is like in Home Alone when he's almost hit by the van. That was done backwards.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So those are my facts of the movie.
Well, there you go. I also had a fun fact this week.
Oh.
1,000,000 years ago, TVs used to go off at night.
Yes.
That's kind of like an important premise to understand to get important parts of this movie.
Right.
But could you imagine if Netflix didn't work after like 11 p.m.?
I bet a whole bunch of production would be done.
Yeah. Yeah, but the idea of like waking up in the middle of the night and seeing your kid talking to static is creepy.
Yeah.
Super creepy, regardless.
Pretty terrifying, yeah. It does, like, I enjoy watching things like that because, like, remembering it happening, it's just like, oh, those are good old days before, like, the bad infomercial, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Remember watching those just, like, super late, like, nothing's on, but you don't want to go to bed for whatever reason.
Yeah. Well, and like the bar for entertainment back then is because it's like you don't have anything on demand, so you're just limited to whatever you can scroll through the channels and find. And so it's like this battle between what is the least uninteresting thing that's on right now, even though there's like no real good answers. But yeah, so this movie in general, I thought got off to a fairly good start. It was a little, I mean, it came across as a little dated just because I felt like there were a lot of like blatant, like, hey, this is 80s suburban life in California, you know, like it was very much set in the time and place that it was made. And at the time, it probably felt like very contemporary and modern, whereas now, you know, just everything from, you know, the costuming and the way that people were acting and talking and dressed, all the way to kind of the way it was filmed and some of the stylistic elements of that, the way the movie was made, all felt very much of like early 80s.
Yeah, it did. That's what, I mean, this movie is kind of a prime example of, you know, movies that we've done in the past where they said that they didn't want to include cars because it dates the movie and stuff. Like, that's a prime example because you knew, which is kind of hard because, like you were saying, you know, you included a TV that, you know, goes static after, you know, the programs have aired. But I mean, I guess how are you supposed to know that it won't do that anymore? But yeah, it was definitely dated, which we knew when we had Craig T. Nelson.
Yeah, looking surprisingly young. I enjoyed it.
I liked him.
Yeah, but one thing I noticed too that I thought was really cool, just from like a very like basic practical effects standpoint, was the way like a staticky TV is just like static. But anytime you had like the scene of the room while the staticky TV was on, they were doing like a slow strobe effect that made it even like more creepy. And like I thought that was such a low effort thing that was so effective from the movie making perspective. That really stood out to me. I liked it.
I think that's what you'll probably have with like seasoned like producers or directors, like things like that coming up. I would like to think, but it definitely aided in the atmosphere, I guess, of the movie, if you want to say that. I also like kind of wondered while watching this if movies like Insidious or Conjuring, like where things happen in the background, or like Paranormal Activity, like where things are kind of happening in the background, like if that has made some of the scenes from the older movies better because like you're expecting or you're looking at for that kind of stuff. But that was just
even though it's not there, like you think that it could be. So there's that.
The added stress to it. I will say, like, from like even the beginning, which I thought was like the better part of the movie, like the first half, I would say.
I agree.
And this also comes because I just watched 3 Indiana Jones movies, but it definitely like had that same feel for me as an Indiana Jones movie, and the directing style and like the storyline and stuff. Not exact, but just the things that would pop up. Like there was some humor that was involved, but in the fact of like nostalgic feeling, even though I didn't watch this when I was a kid, it still felt nostalgic, like something I would have watched. So I definitely had that, going for me, and which I think I enjoyed it a little bit more than what you may have. But I thought it was like, oh man, this brings me right back to home. I wish, I had seen this when I was younger. I don't know why I hadn't.
Yeah. Well, I felt like the beginning of this was very disarming, because even though there was some kind of like more ominous stuff, it was, like you said, it kind of had a sense of humor. It was like a very kind of 80s adventure in the neighborhood with the kids type movie. And, it just had like, it opens and the little girl's bird dies, and so they get her a goldfish, and then, the parents are smoking weed in the bedroom and trying to hide it from the kids. And it's just kind of like a goofy, almost like family comedy movie in the beginning. And then it really transitioned from that, though, into something more. And in the way that it was, I think that it was kind of subtle in the tone of the movie changing. Like their reaction to the moving chairs, for example, I thought was like fairly realistic. Yeah. And it wasn't like they were super like terrified, or all of a sudden the movie got really dark or anything. It was like they just went next door and asked the neighbor if anything was going on weird for him, and then they were like kind of embarrassed about it, So I think that the way that they sort of like tried to rationalize that and think about it made it seem like, maybe there's not danger necessarily, or there's something unexplained, but it's not necessarily anything that you should be afraid of. And then when things really like escalated and they had that next storm, and the tree comes through the window and is pulling Robbie back out, and it's like super loud and bright, and the parents are trying to get him out of the tree, and inside the little girl is getting pulled by into that bright light in the closet, and everyone's yelling, and it's just like super intense. That was like a really big step up, I thought, in like the tone of the movie. And by doing that, a little ways in, after being like more subtle in the beginning, to me that was a lot more like attention grabbing. And so I thought from just like a pacing perspective, because that's the thing we talk about a lot with these movies, this one did, through the first half at least, like a really good job of sort of escalating and keeping it interesting and taking you from that, hey, I'm safe and everything's good, to holy crap, no.
Yeah. I think it had like, I think one of the reasons that it kind of had that silly, it was just like almost like it had some witty dialogue, I guess is where I'm getting at. So, for example, like it's almost like a satire, and like an old story where like the girl's sitting there watching the static, and the mom tells her, she's going to rot her eyes out, and then turns on like a war movie, kind of thing. Or like, at the end when the psychic is talking to the mom, and the mom says that she's going to go, and the psychic says no, and she says, "You've never done this before," and the mom's response was like, "You've never done this before either," and the psychic says, "You're right, you can go." Like, it was just kind of witty dialogue.
And I like that they kind of went back to that after that big scene. Because, they go and talk to the paranormal investigators, and then they're, like, super academic about it all and just, like, very mansplaining how the paranormal works. But it's all this, like, goofy stuff, like a thing moving across the room over the course of, like, 2 days or something. That, it's just really, like, underwhelming. And then they get into the house, and then the parents just go, like, open the door, and you see all this stuff, like, orbiting around in the room. And it's like, we've got some experience with how this stuff works. And I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty clever. Because you saw, like, Craig T. Nelson's, like, response where he's just, like, it almost looks like he's, like, zoned out. Like, okay, yeah, whatever. And then you realize why, and he opens the door. He's like, yeah, we got something way better than what you're talking about. It took 7 hours to move that car 7 feet or whatever. And, he's just like, okay, yeah, come check this out.
Yeah.
But when that happened, though, and they opened the door, that's when I kind of felt it was almost cartoonish.
Mm-hmm.
With all the stuff going around, like, it definitely felt kind of cartoonish. Now, granted, the time, it was being made, still, it just definitely seemed a little, like, almost childish,
Yeah, for sure. And I had written down similar things about, like, that kind of amoebus blob that was coming out of the TV earlier in the movie, and then there was another part where when that investigator is having the vision of the steak moving across the counter and the warp's coming out, but then he goes into the bathroom, he's like starting to peel the skin off his face. Yeah. That really felt more like a wax museum than it did realistic at all. Like it was almost like a parody, or like it was trying not to be too realistic or something.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely did have the vibes where it did seem like this was almost like a joke. Which, if the movies are made for that, like Dell and Tucker vs. Evil, kind of like joke. If it's made for that, like, I find it funny. But if it's not, it's like, man, I want it to be taken serious. Let's not shit on a category, here. Yeah. But I don't think it was intentional. I think it was intentionally done to, like, do that towards horror movies, but it's also at the same time, it's like, I get that you want to have the humor thrown in because it does give you that little break. But still, at the same time, it's just like, all right, well, we know that not everyone's going to die in this movie because it's a, Steven Spielberg movie.
Sure. Yeah.
But, like, let's make it good between,
Yeah. Well, and this movie was also PG, and I think that it was very much written to be a PG movie. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, and I think that in some ways it was successful in, like, scarring a generation.
Well, yeah, but it's also like a 1980s PG.
Yeah, but then it also, had the aspect of, like, there was a lot of stuff in there that I feel like was meant to kind of break up the terror and to say, like, okay, we made it through it and everything's okay. And I think that those scenes could kind of offset a little bit, like, the effectiveness of the horror, like the whisper scene, where it just goes on and on and on, and I hated it, and I had to turn on the subtitles, and it wasn't worth it. But it was like, okay, this is the scene where Steven Spielberg tries to explain death to children in an accessible and comforting way. And it was just, like, the most ridiculous thing.
Which scene was it? The whisper scene?
Yeah.
Was that after the doobie?
No, so it's after the paranormal investigators are there, and they're all, like, staying downstairs, and they just go on and on and
Couldn't
on.
Agree more.
Like, oh my gosh, I hated it.
Now, here's why I liked it, though. Not that scene. Right on board with you on that. I thought it was great, though, because, like, the parents were smoking a doobie on the bed.
Oh, yeah.
And the dad was reading Reagan, the Man, the President.
Yes. Yeah.
And I was like, that's amazing, for one. Like, you just don't expect it,
Mm-hmm.
But then he went out, because the kids came in, And I thought they kind of played off nonchalantly about, smoking a doobie in the house. I was just like, wow, that's a random thing that just happened. Okay. But then I felt like he was a good dad to the kids, like helping the son go to sleep when he was scared of the tree and stuff. Sure. I was like, gosh, he did that stoned. Like, I've never been stoned before, but I just assume it'd be hard to talk to kids.
Yeah. Well, and in that, back to that scene where the investigators are there, they totally did the whole, like, this house is under surveillance, and so now you can watch some things happening through the view of the cameras thing. Yeah. Like, way before it was cool. I was kind of, like, pleasantly surprised by that, so.
Yeah, I read that this movie was actually, like, kind of based, and, we get a ton of these, but based off of, like, a Twilight Zone episode. But I think that, I kind of feel personally that it influenced a few things.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say specifically, like, starting off new was, like, Stranger Things. Mm-hmm. That was definitely, like, I feel like they kind of took part of this idea or were influenced by some of it as far as, like, with the static communicating through the wall kind of thing the mom could
for sure.
Hear and all that, which, I mean, they just kind of took it a step further. But it was just like, oh, that's kind of like what this is, that the daughter's gone, missing. They can hear, the kid is freaking out because it's by something, which is kind of the same for Insidious too, I think. Mm-hmm. But it's just that's kind of interesting. Definitely influenced a lot.
For sure. Yeah, I think this movie has influenced a ton of stuff over time. And one thing similarly that I saw too was with, like, The Conjuring, and I had wondered if the paranormal investigators in this were, like, loosely based off the Warrens, but it was done so in kind of a buffoonish way. They were clearly the butt of the joke for most of it. Yeah. But because, it was a man and his wife, and they were there and, like, kind of explaining in, like, a very academic way how the spirit world works, I wondered if there was some connective tissue there.
Yeah, but, could be. Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, for sure. I don't think anyone has an original idea anymore.
Yeah. But yeah, and again, I mean, I feel like this movie kind of just came in waves, and so you would have, like, the big horror wave, and then you would have, like, the little, like, oh, that's kind of weird wave, and then you'd have, like, the more funny wave. So it's like, oh, you're scared. Okay, you're coming down. Okay, now we can laugh again. And so there was, like, the scene, like I mentioned, the investigator that's eating and sees the steak move across the counter, and then all those maggots in the chicken leg and stuff. And that was, like, super intense and scary if you can get through the effects. But then they recorded those, like, shining orbs coming down the staircase. And again, that was kind of weird and creepy, but there wasn't anything, like, inherently scary or dangerous about it. And then the dad's boss shows up, and he's, like, hurrying him out of the house as the piano is moving around on its own, and the lights are flashing, and he's like trying to hide it. And so it just that pattern, I feel like, happened over and over and over in this movie, where you got, like, a legit intense scene, and then a more of a just kind of supernatural scene, and then the humor. Yeah. But that was the point then when they found out that they've been building on top of these graveyards. Mm-hmm. And so you get the little, like, explanation basically of the story that they're experiencing all this because the company has built all these homes on top of some sort of, site that includes the souls or ghosts of a lot of people. And that, my friend, is where I feel like this movie went off the rails. Because that's about the point that they introduced Tangina Barrett.
Is she the psychic?
She is a clairvoyant little person with an accent from the Deep South.
Don't mansplain things to me, Daniel. I don't even know what that means. Yep. You just said it earlier.
Yep. So she spends a lot of time explaining life versus death, but you don't really get any background on her. And I kind of tuned out and checked Twitter for a while because she talked for a long time. And then she says there's a dark force on the other side, and it's super powerful and unlike anything she's seen. And it's controlling Carol Ann, and it appears to her as another child, but it's really the beast. Okay, but that doesn't ever really turn into much more. But it does segue into what I refer to as the yelling scene. So earlier in the movie, we had the whisper scene that I didn't like, and now we have the yelling scene, which I also didn't like. But just to explain why I didn't like it, I want to play for you a little clip of that scene.
Okay.
And I want you to hear the way the lines are spoken, and I want you to really think about what the lines of dialogue are, and then try to tell me that this is anything less than reprehensible. So I have said, I'm going in after her about 1,000 times over the last week, and Sarah's real tired of it, but it makes me giggle every time.
That's great. That's very great. So, yeah, I thought that was, I was like, oh, that's actually kind of clever, like something I feel like, I did the equivalent of, like when Indiana Jones went to go like fight the guy and just pulled out his gun and shot him and then went running off. Yeah. Like it was kind of like that, like added. I was like, that has to be like a direct Steven Spielberg influence. But yeah, it does like, it's like they're building up this whole like intense scene. I say it's intense. Like even when like they were throwing tennis balls through, you know, the gateway or whatever it was just like, oh man, like this guy's kind of cheesy. Yeah, it was kind of a bummer, but, yeah. Such a strange, like, character, I think.
It really was. And I just wonder, like, how many times in just, like, daily life does she flip into that mode?
Oh, yeah. Probably, I mean, I would think a bunch.
So, like, her sister goes into a department store, and then she gets out of the car, and their friend is like, where are you going? She's like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
I wish I could just, like, maybe hire her, get, like, a cameo or something.
Oh my god,
to say that. Or maybe, like, if I could go back in time to when we were recording, like our EP or whatever, like, get that added to before a song or something that has nothing to do with it.
Yeah. Well, and then just the whole, like, you can't go in there, you've never done this. And she's like, neither of you. And she's like, yeah. But it's still, like, being yelled forcefully, like they're in an argument. Like, just that whole thing, it was fantastic. But it also destroyed my being hooked by the movie at that point.
So, just a little fact. That's her name's Selva Rubinstein.
Mm-hmm.
And she was also in Poltergeist: The Legacy in 1996.
Oh, so quite the accomplished actress.
And she was the voice of Skittles Candies in the long-running Taste the Rainbow ad campaign. And outspoken activism for little people and her early participation in the fight against HIV and AIDS.
Well, that's good.
So, Daniel.
She's a legit good person off screen.
But you know what she did for those people with AIDS?
Told them to go towards the light.
She went after them.
That's true. Yeah. Anyway, so as this movie progresses, Tangina starts telling all the children to go towards the light instead of trying to get them to safety, and they end up kind of pushing her out of the situation, and then Craig T. Nelson is and his wife are playing hero ball to get the daughter out, and they succeed, and then the big flaming skull comes out, and then the mom and the little girl get out on the other side, and then it like all ends, and Tangina takes a bow and says, "The house is clean."
Yeah. Freaking liar.
Because she was like, "Children, just go towards the light and die." And then the mom's like, and then she does. And then the parents do all the work, and basically everyone except Tangina risks it all to save the kid, and they do. And then she just like takes the bow, walks on out. I bet she sent them a bill.
Oh yeah, 100%. And probably had an extra $100 tacked on for transportation.
Yeah. So anyway, that was weird. But that was another one of those, like, the super intense moment happens, and then that scene happens that's meant to be kind of funny. And then it just flashes to the family moving out of the house, which I thought was really funny, too. Like, it gave no interim explanation. It's just, we're gone. And then, yeah.
Well, so, they made Poltergeist 2. And I think, like, most of the actors come back for that. So Diane Freely, she's there. Or I'm sorry. Jo Beth Williams, who plays Diane Freely, Craig T. Nelson, Heather O'Rourke, like all the same, and even Zelda. She's in all of the Poltergeist movies.
Well, I guess I know one that we're doing next season.
I'm talking about next week. It's 5.7 on IMDb.
Nice.
I think for me, with the ending, though, it was like she says, like, okay, the house is clear, and so you're like, okay, you're good, but, like, it was obvious, like, insult, because it was obvious insult because, like, they were just trying to build up the
second ending?
Yes, the whole second ending, and it was just like, I hate when that kind of stuff happens, like, you just straight up lied to us. But, all in all, I mean, I don't think this was necessarily the worst movie we've ever seen.
I mean, it's a good PG horror movie. I would give it that.
I would probably actually say it's probably one of the better ones.
Yeah. And maybe the choice of, like, the very strange character was meant to be more comforting to kids or something. I don't know. It was just...
more cartoonish.
Yeah.
I wasn't, like, bummed out at the end of this one.
Yeah, and I mean, I thought it was better than, like, The Witches or some of the other, like, more kids horror movies that we've seen, so I guess I should be thankful.
But you know what's not better than the best Halloween children's movie of all time?
Which is?
Killer Clowns from Outer Space. Not really. Ernest Scared Stupid.
Oh, yeah, obviously. I thought you were just going to say, like, Halloween.
Well, I was going to take it a different way.
Scare them straight.
And then I went with Killer Clowns from Outer Space because I watched that when I was a child.
It shows.
Yeah, no, man. I feel like this podcast we didn't get super off topic like we normally do. Should we?
Yeah, not as far as I thought we would.
Yeah, we did good.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else for this one?
Nah.
Okay, so here is the new ending. Are you ready for it?
Yeah.
So with this new ending...
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.
Do you know who my favorite character of this movie was? His name's Jeff Shaw in the movie. He's played by Dirk Blocker.
Does he go in after anyone?
He's not brave enough.
We can't all be heroes. Then there would be no heroes.
That's true.